So we're making a 2.5D action roguelike game called Riftella, and it used to look like this. And well, we spent the last 6 months turning it into this. So hi, how's it going? The name's Silurus, and after months of just scrapping things and overhauling visuals and features, I think I can now say that we're in one of the best parts of game development, adding content. In previous devlogs, it was mostly just promises on what the game would be, but now we have over 5 unique weapons, 5 unique spells, multiple relics, curses and blessings for the weapons, and a totally overhauled art style for the game. We're in a phase of alpha testing. We're playing the game ourselves first to polish it some more before we go ahead and release it into a closed beta test. But it's been a while since a devlog, so why not catch you guys up to speed on what's been happening, starting with the weapons. Before we only had one weapon, which is the giant chainsaw, but I tweaked this too to match the current art style of the game. Here's the side-by-side comparison of what it looked like before and what it looks like now. With that in mind, let's get into the 4 new weapons that you can find in the game. Starting with the hammer. It's a charged melee weapon that has one unique thing, knockback. The more you charge, the further the enemies will go. It looks a bit silly right now, but I do like how unhinged the knockback is. I designed it like seashells merged into a mechanical hammer, since I think water is normally associated with knockback anyway, so I wanted a knockback weapon like the hammer to really lean into that water aesthetic. Next is a simple weapon but still pretty fun to use, the spear. It's a medium-range melee weapon. Right now it just has one consistent attack, which is the stab. I do still like using it, and personally, it feels a little strong right now, using it to just tear down enemies. I went for a red aesthetic like the chainsaw because it's mainly a damage-based attack. Apparently you can dash cancel with this too for any gamers out there who are interested in that kind of stuff. Then there's the ranged weapon, starting with the bow. The bow right now is pretty unique since it's the only weapon that's both a quickfire and a charge weapon. So when you press the mouse once, it fires off multiple bullets that homes into the enemy. But if you hold the mouse click long enough, it charges into a big arrow that you can use based on your situation. The bow has 12 bullets that you can use before you have to reload, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it's a lot better than the next and last weapon, the fan. Having the yellow aesthetic like the other long-range weapon, the bow, with 6 bullets, it acts like a shotgun. It releases bullets based on the ammo you have, so when you have 6 ammo, it shoots out 6 bullets, but if you fire the fan before it can fully reload, you can shoot just a couple of bullets. A faster but weaker solution, perfect for enemies that are still stunned from a break and has low health. And this is probably a good opportunity to explain the break and flow mechanic of the game, since it's been reworked just a tiny bit. So all enemies have a health bar and a stance bar. The more you attack the enemy, the more the stance bar fills up. And when it finally reaches maximum, the enemy gets stunned, the player can now access its health bar, and you get something called flow, which is basically mana for this game, allowing you to use the different spells in the game. Oh yeah, in Riftella you can get 2 weapon slots and 2 spell slots that you can combo different synergies to your liking. So you can use a shotgun to break the enemy stance instantly, and then use something like a chainsaw to finish them off. But if you watched the previous devlog, you know none of these are new. So what did we add? First of all, flow does not have a timer anymore, so you can save up to 4 stacks of flow and not worry about a countdown. And then there's something we want to add, which is stagger. With this, the stance bar will be segmented. You know how enemies in games usually stop when you hit them? Well, we did not want that mechanic to be so easy in our game, so you can only stop an enemy from what it's doing once you reach a certain amount of stance damage. Aside from that, whatever you're doing, it will just keep attacking you or doing whatever the hell it wants. With all these stance, break, and flow talk, we should probably talk about the new spells in the game. Before we had this giant lance spell that mainly does damage, it looks a bit like this now. But there are 4 new spells in the game right now, each with different uses. First is Orbital Flames. Summoning 3 orbs that orbit around the player, it stays like that for a couple of seconds, doing passive damage as you fight through enemies. It's a pretty good spell for proccing effects from Relics since it hits an enemy multiple times in its lifespan. Then we have the Vex. Summoning a cursed spirit that makes every enemy that steps within its range take more damage. I like this spell since I like getting bigger numbers for my weapon damage, like a shotgun that's enhanced with Relics is really fun to scale with the Vex. This spell is also another passive like the next spell, which is actually another summon spell with the Rock Frog. Using this spell summons a leaping rock frog that inflicts enemies with vulnerable, so they take more damage. It's a bit similar to Vex spell, but this one deals damage and has to hit the enemies to inflict vulnerable debuffs. A quick note, the spells right now in the game could be a lot better, so we would probably tune a lot of these to get them to feel better, or scrap them for better and more unique ones. But with that aside, here's my favorite spell to use right now. Tidal Dash. It's a water-based spell knocking back enemies as you go through them in a giant wave of water. I love how the movement feels with it, and the favorite part I have right now is using it when you just have a lot of flow. You can put enemies in a corner with something like the hammer and just spam it to just tear through everything. It's fun. With that, we have all 5 spells for the game, but we probably want to add something called basic spells. Right now, when you start the game, you're only given a random weapon with no spells. So it's a bit of a problem just fighting the first few encounters with all that flow but 0 spell. So we would add basic spells that you can use to at least combo with your starting weapon. Something like a basic slash or a basic knockback spell would do. But if you have any other ideas for what basic spells or even just spells and weapons, leave a comment. Who knows, we might like your idea and add it into the game. And I'm curious in what you guys think about basic spells. We can just add a random spell in the starting area too, but we're afraid of it incentivizing restarting the game for a better combo. That's why we want to use basic spells. But if you guys have any other ideas on what we can do about this, let me know. Another thing you can think about is the weapon upgrade system we have called Curses and Blessings. So the gist of it is when you get into this encounter, you can choose one weapon to enchant with a blessing, but that blessing comes with a curse too, both of them being randomized. You can pick 1 out of 3 combinations of curses and blessings that you want to put into your weapons. Some of these are simple things like dealing more or less damage to health or stance. This can be used if you have a dedicated weapon for breaking stance and one for tearing through enemy health. There's also curses that lower the weapon damage the more flow you have, so you have to actively use spells in order to keep the weapon in its best condition. We want the player to think on what blessings they want and what curse would least likely weigh them down. Like this playtest run I had where I naively put a cooldown on my spear, making it practically useless. I'm getting that. I think... Oh no, it has a cooldown now! No! Another scenario is this curse for ranged weapons that locks the weapon, basically putting a cooldown if you reach 0 bullets. Using it in the bow, if you're really observant and controlling of your ammos, it can never even activate. Using it in the fan will activate it every time, but since it has to reload anyway, it's more of like a slight delay if anything. But in order to discuss the curses and blessings more, we have to talk about the different status effects we have in the game, since a lot of blessings are actually for applying status effects, like poison. In Riftella, poison bypasses stance and immediately goes for the health of the enemy. This sounds strong, but it also does not give you flow if you actually kill the enemy like this, so it's a fair trade-off in my opinion. It has a maximum of 10 stacks and slowly ticks down over time. The next is Demise. This activates after an enemy stance gets broken, immediately consuming all stacks of Demise and turning it all into damage for the health bar that is now accessible to the player. Then there's Energize, that is actually not applied to the enemy, but rather into the weapons. Usually this happens after a break. An Energize effect is applied and the next attack now deals double damage. One way I really like using Energize is for the fan. Since it deals so much damage, couple it with a Vex spell or a relic that buffs ranged weapons, then boom, you can one-shot some enemies just like that. The next status effects is something we really like. Jolt. Jolt deals damage whenever an enemy moves. This can be activated by any type of movement like walking. It ticks down every second, but it truly shines when you couple it with a knockback spell or weapon like the hammer. Imagine getting an enemy into 10 maximum stacks of Jolt, and then charge your hammer into a full knockback, and yeah, you get the point. It feels really satisfying to just have an enemy die in one shot after doing this. A unique yet fun status effect. Then finally, a curse type status effect called Tolerance, which is applied to the enemy, which will make them take minus 75% status effect damage. One stack is consumed when damage is reduced this way. With all these active abilities, let's move on to something a bit more passive. Let's talk about the new Relics. Items you collect in a run that gives you certain abilities to really push your build. Let me give you a few sneak peek into the new relics that we plan on adding. There are simple ones like the Solar Arrow that buffs all projectiles, coupled that with the Will-O-Wisp, a relic that shoots out a projectile every time you dash. There's also status effect based relics like the Leviathan Fang, which makes spells apply poison to enemies who have no poison on them yet. which can synergize with the Poison Pipe, which immediately consumes all poison stacks when it reaches the maximum limit, negating the waiting time poison usually has. Another one is the Talisman, that gives demise to the closest enemy when flow is consumed. One of my favorite relics right now are the Jolt Boots, which gives one jolt to the nearest enemy after a certain distance that the player moves, making for really fun build-ups to a satisfying knockback finish. There's a lot more relics to showcase, and all of them have unique uses like stance damage, vulnerable, health damage, and such. We have ideas to limit the amount of relics you can carry, like a maximum of 5, but make all of the relics really impactful to the run instead of a mere stat increase. Now that I think about it, I should also say that a lot of the names in these videos are placeholders. If you guys have any bright ideas on what we can call these relics, curses and blessings, spells, and even the weapons, let me know what you guys think about that too. But let's move into one of the biggest changes we made: environment. Riftella used to look like this, but I decided that using line art and tile sets would probably help the game in the long run. So I deleted everything about 3 times or so to finally arrive on this art style. The journey of the art went from 2D line art to painterly 2D, then we experimented on 3D stuff, but it's a bit uncanny when it's plain, so we went back to 2D and decided to ditch the painterly style I had for the game and go with more line art again, which I can say with certainty is not going anywhere anymore. I like how it looks, and this is what the game would look like now. There are other things left to be added and we can keep improving on it, but no massive overhauls will happen anymore into the art style of the game. This project really taught me that being scalable and learning how to reuse assets effectively is an essential part of being a game artist and a game developer. I plan to adjust all character sprites to match the art style like I did with the weapons, but that will take a while, so you can have the old designs for now. This is what the first area of the game looks like right now. We plan on adding 2 more areas before you can reach the ending of the game, each having their own enemy types, elites, and bosses. But aside from that, one final thing we have are special encounters. These are rooms like the curses and blessings and a shop. What's a roguelike without a shop, right? All of these will have different NPCs that are stationed in them. I have really big plans on what these NPCs will be, but I plan to announce them on a later devlog, so if you don't want to miss that, well, I'm just saying. The shop right now has 5 items you can buy, and there will be even more special encounters in the future. The shop and curses and blessings room can be seen in the map, but the other special encounters would be hidden behind this icon. This means there's a random special encounter in this room that you would have to risk on what it actually would be. I'm really happy on where we are in the game's development right now. I hope you are as excited as we are, even though we don't have a playable version to the public yet. Stick around the channel if you want to see how this game turns out. How do you do that? Well, subscribe!